Hello everyone and welcome. No, I'm kidding. I just want to say and welcome like this. I'm Asaf Peri and I bought the magnificent Lego 42083 Bugatti Chiron set, and I challenged myself to understand the drive mechanism in it, and I can say it's nothing but genius. But a bigger challenge than understanding it is to try to explain it. And that's the goal of this tutorial. Let's start with the mechanisms before and after the gearbox, because they are simpler. Then we'll get to the holy grail of the set, which is the gearbox itself. Well, let's start with the engine. The engine, as you can see, has only two gears in a ratio of 12 to 20, which is 3 to 5 ratio, and then it goes to the selector. The selector, I mean the neutral drive or reverse in the front part of the car. Let us now examine the selector rear view. It has the engine that connects to it, and then it has the gearbox gear change main shaft. It has the shaft that go into the rear and front differentials, and the shaft that goes to the gearbox itself. All right, now let us examine the selector itself. It has a 8-tooth wheel that comes from the engine that mesh with a 24-tooth wheel, which together with the 3 to 5 ratio of the engine itself make a 1 to 5 ratio, subtotal. I mean the engine goes to the selector by two meshings, 12 to 20 as we seen before, and here 8 to 24, subtotal 1 to 5. All right, so the selector have a drive shaft that can be selected to two modes. One, the simplest one, is the reverse. As we can see, it meshes in a ratio of 1 to 1, I mean 16 to 16 gears, so it's 1 to 1. Or we can choose the drive mode, in which a 20 gear meshed into a 24 gear, meaning that the ratio would be 20 to 24, which means 5 to 6. Now let us inspect the mechanism after the gearbox or selector, which is the differential. Very simple, 20 gear to 28 gear, a ratio of 5 to 7. Now, just one step before we will inspect the holy grail, the gearbox itself. As you can see, the out shaft, let's call it, from the gearbox meshed with the shaft that going to the differentials by two gears of 24 and 8, means a ratio of 3 to 1. So all happens in the gearbox, all the ratios should be multiplied by the other ratios before and after, that gear down or gear up, we will see that, the ratios between the engine and the wheels. Now let us inspect all the information we know until now. The reverse mode is the simplest. The engine ratio is 1 to 5, the selector ratio is 1, the differential ratio is 5 to 7, which means the total engine to wheels ratio is 1:7. With the gears, we still don't know the gearbox ratios itself, but we do know that the engine ratio is 1:5, the selector ratio is 5:6, the gearbox to diff ratio is 3, and the diff ratio is 5:7. So now we only need to inspect the gearbox ratios, and then we can know the total engine to wheels ratio. Now let us inspect the holy grail of this car, which is the gearbox itself. As you can see, it has the differential shaft, the gearbox in shaft that comes from the selector, and it has the primary gear chain shaft that goes to the famous selector or gear selector in the front below the driving wheel, and it has a secondary gear chain shaft. The secondary gear chain shaft is passive, which means that it only rotates when the gray part makes it rotates. It means that every rotation of the primary gear chain shaft, the secondary gear chain shaft moves only by a quarter of a rotation. Both the primary and secondary change gear shafts are connected to this new piece, these orange parts, the selectors, which are designed in a way that each quarter of a turn they change the ring connector beside them, either to be engaged to one of the sides or to be in neutral. They are mounted in this specific gearbox in a way that they affect two ring connectors, one at their side in the top and one below them at the bottom, in a way that when one ring is engaged to other one of the sides, the other one is in neutral. I mean, there's no chance that two of them will be engaged, only one of them, either the bottom or either the top. The gearbox has three main essence parts. The first is the in shaft, which comes from the selector. Then there's the transitional shaft, which drives the power into the out shaft. Now, between the in shaft and the transitional shaft, what makes the ratio is the secondary gear chain shaft. Its position makes different ratios. And the ratio between the transitional shaft to the out shaft is made by the primary gear chain shaft, which connects to the selector below the driving wheel at the front part of the car. Let's first talk about the transitional shaft. It is very simple. It all made up of 16 tooth wheels, which mean it delivers the speed and torque by a ratio of 1:1 from its start to the end of it. Alright, let us start with the relationship with the in shaft to the transitional shaft, which, as we said, controlled by the secondary gear chain shaft. As we can see, the transitional shaft is connected to both top and bottom shafts with 16 tooth meshings from both sides of the connector rings. As I explained, only one of the ring connectors can be engaged at a time. When the bottom ring connector is engaged to either sides, the ratio is 1:1, created by the simple meshing of the 16 tooth wheel. When the bottom ring connector is not engaged, the top one is. The in-shaft power goes up until the 20-tooth gear at the end, which meshed with a 12-tooth one, which connects to another 20-tooth gear, which meshed with another 12-tooth gear at the top, which connected to the top shaft. That gives a ratio of 20 to 12 square, which means 5 to 3 square, which means 25 to 9. The top shaft, as explained, is meshed in both sides with the transitional shaft with the 16-tooth gears, means 1-to-1 ratio, which means that the total ratio is kept 25 to 9. Let's sum it up. The secondary gear change shaft controls the ratio between the in shaft and the transitional shaft, and has basically two ratio modes in essence, 1-to-1 or 25 to 9. Depends on which ring connector is engaged. If the bottom is engaged, it's 1-to-1. If the top is engaged, is 25 to 9 due to the meshing of the 20 and the 12 tooth meshing at the end of the gearbox. The relationship between the transitional shaft and the out shaft is a little bit more complex. If the bottom ring connector is engaged, the power from the transitional shaft goes in pretty much a simple way to the out shaft. If the ring connector is engaged with the red 16-tooth gear, the ratio is 16 to 16, or in other words, 1-to-1. If it engaged with the blue 20-tooth one, the ratio is 12 to 20, or in other words, 3 to 5. But if the bottom ring connector is not engaged, the power of the transitional shaft goes up to a middle outer shaft through the 16th and 8th tooth gears at the end. The ratio between the middle outer shaft and the transitional shaft is kept 1-to-1. The middle outer shaft has 16 and 20 tooth gears, which mesh with their counterparts 20 and 16 tooth respectively, at both ends of the top shaft ring connector. It means that the ratio is either 20 to 16 or 16 to 20. In other words, 5 to 4 or 4 to 5. The top shaft ring connector delivers the power to the out shaft through chain meshings of 16 tooth gears, keeping the ratio unchanged. Let's sum it up. The primary gear change shaft sets the ratio between the transitional shaft and the out shaft and has 4 ratio modes: 3 to 5, 4 to 5, 1-to-1, and 5 to 4. So now we can calculate the ratios of the gears. Gear 1, 3 to 5, Gear 2, 4 to 5, Gear 3, 1, Gear 4, 5 to 4, Gear 5, 5 to 3, Gear 6, 20 to 9, Gear 7, 25 to 9, and Gear 8, 125 to 36. Now we can combine this data with all the rest of the data we gathered until now and calculate the total engine to wheel ratio. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial. I hope you understand all my explanations and you find it understood. That's it. I'm Asaf Peri. Bye bye.